Most people think they've handled emergency preparedness. They bought a few extra cans of soup, tossed some bottled water in the garage, and called it done. Maybe they even have a bag of rice. That's where most preparedness advice begins and ends. Stack calories, tick the box, move on. Here's the problem with that approach. It confuses having food with having a functional food supply. Those are two entirely different things. One keeps you from starving for 3 days. The other keeps your household actually running, physically capable, mentally stable, and eating real meals for weeks. The gap isn't about how much food you have. It's about what's missing from the structure of what you've stored. Fat, flavor, speed of preparation, nutritional completeness, preservation capability. Most standard pantry lists ignore every single one of these. People only find out the hard way when energy drops for no obvious reason, when morale quietly collapses, when nobody can stomach another bowl of plain rice. This list fixes that. These aren't the foods that show up on every generic checklist. These are the specific items that close the gaps most people never knew existed, and almost all of them cost very little, take up almost no space, and are sitting on grocery store shelves right now. Let's get into it. Number 20, hard candy and glucose tablets. This sounds trivial. It isn't. During the first 24 to 48 hours of any genuine emergency, energy management becomes a critical operational concern. Stress hormones spike. Physical activity increases. People skip meals because they're busy dealing with the situation. My blood sugar fluctuates more than usual, particularly in children and anyone with metabolic sensitivities. Hard candy addresses this directly. A small handful provides an immediate glucose hit when someone's focus is dropping, when a child is becoming unmanageable, or when you need to push through a task before sitting down to eat properly. Glucose tablets, the kind used by diabetics, are even more efficient for this purpose and take up almost no space. Beyond the physiological function, there's a psychological one. During genuine disruption, small familiar pleasures carry disproportionate value. A piece of hard candy is something normal. It signals that things aren't completely falling apart. That matters more than most preparedness guides are willing to acknowledge. Store them in a sealed container. They last for years without any special treatment. Cost is negligible. Number 19, rolled oats, not instant packets. Plain rolled oats, bulk or boxed, with nothing added. Here's why this distinction matters. Rolled oats cook in 5 minutes with hot water. They require no electricity, no complex preparation, and no technique. They work with whatever you have, water and heat. That's the complete requirement. In an emergency where cooking infrastructure is degraded, anything that cooks fast conserves fuel and time simultaneously. Nutritionally, rolled oats deliver complex carbohydrates for sustained energy, meaningful dietary fiber that supports digestive health during a period when your diet is likely to shift significantly, and modest protein content. They're also one of the easiest foods to get children to eat without resistance, particularly when you can add honey or dried fruit. The storage life of properly sealed oats is 5 years or more. Oxygen absorbers in sealed containers can push that further. Cost per calorie is extremely low. A 5-kilogram bag occupies minimal shelf space and provides dozens of meals. Practical application: breakfast that requires almost nothing from you. When everything else in a situation demands attention, a meal that takes 5 minutes and produces zero stress is worth having. Number 18, breakfast cereal. Stay with this one. Breakfast cereal seems completely unserious as an emergency food. That's exactly the thinking that makes it undervalued. The majority of real emergencies that households actually face last 48 to 72 hours. A storm, a power disruption, a localized supply problem. For those situations, the single most valuable thing food can do is require absolutely nothing from you. No cooking, no water, no heat, no preparation. Open the container and eat. In the first hours of any disruption, your cognitive load is already elevated. You're managing information, managing other people, and trying to understand what's happening. The last thing you need is a meal that demands effort. A box of cereal requires zero effort. It also tends to be the one food that children will eat without complaint during a stressful situation, which is a genuinely practical advantage. Most commercial cereals are also fortified with B vitamins, iron, and sometimes vitamin D, a partial but meaningful nutritional contribution when you're running lean. 2 or 3 boxes of what your household already eats, stored in airtight containers. That's it. is consider it day one food and plan accordingly. Number 17, dried fruit raisins, apricots, cranberries, dates, prunes. Dried fruit does several things that few other stored foods can replicate simultaneously. First, it's calorie-dense relative to its weight and volume. Dates in particular are one of the most calorie-efficient foods available in any grocery store. Second, it provides natural sugars that metabolize quickly when energy is flagging. Third, and this is the underappreciated one, it contributes micronutrients that most emergency food plans are genuinely deficient in. Potassium from apricots and dates, iron from raisins, vitamin C from cranberries and dried mango. The flavor function matters too. Dried fruit added to plain oatmeal, mixed into a rice dish, shakur eaten alongside nuts transforms a monotonous meal into something that registers as variety. When you've been eating from a limited supply for multiple days, anything that creates a sense of variety has real functional value for morale and appetite. Storage life is 1 to 3 years in sealed packaging. Vacuum sealed and kept cool, significantly longer. Cost is low. Volume is minimal. Number 16, apple cider vinegar. Before we move on from the flavor and micronutrient category, apple cider vinegar belongs in your emergency supply, and almost nobody puts it there. Beyond its culinary utility, and that utility is significant, raw apple cider vinegar with active cultures contributes to gut health in ways that matter during an emergency diet shift. When your diet changes dramatically, digestive disruption follows. A tablespoon added to water or stirred into a sauce isn't a miracle cure, but it's a practical tool for maintaining gut function when you're eating from a narrowed food supply. It also functions as a basic antimicrobial cleaning agent, a food preservative in basic pickling applications, and a flavor brightener for grain-heavy meals that have gone flat. One bottle, multiple functions. Store it sealed in a cool location. The acidic pH means it resists spoilage almost indefinitely. Number 15, bouillon cubes picture. Day 10 of living off your emergency supply. Calories covered, nobody going hungry on paper. But something is happening that takes a few days to notice. Monotony. Flat, plain, identical meals day after day. It doesn't register as a crisis immediately. It creeps in. People start eating less because the food doesn't appeal to them. Hence, your patience shortens. The mental energy required to stay steady under stress starts draining faster. This isn't psychological weakness. It's a documented physiological response to appetite suppression caused by food fatigue. One bouillon cube dropped into hot water produces broth. The aroma alone does something to the brain. It signals that a real meal is coming. That signal matters. Plain rice becomes intentional. Beans become soup. The same calories become a completely different eating experience. Beyond flavor, bouillon contributes sodium and trace minerals. During sustained stress, physical activity, or elevated temperature, electrolyte balance is a genuine physiological concern, not a comfort issue. Military field rations have included bouillon for decades for exactly this reason. Or storage. Remove cubes from their cardboard boxes immediately. Cardboard absorbs moisture. A glass jar with a silica gel packet is all you need. One small box seasons dozens of meals. Cost is almost nothing. This is probably the highest return per dollar item on this entire list. Number 14, instant mashed potatoes. Most people treat instant mashed potatoes as a lazy side dish. In an emergency context, that framing misses the point entirely. What instant mashed potato flakes actually represent is a hot, filling, familiar meal that requires only hot water in a few minutes. When cooking infrastructure degrades, when your electric stove is dark and your propane is running lower than expected, anything requiring 30 to 45 minutes of active boiling becomes a liability rather than a solution. The instant potato flakes are ready in the time it takes to boil a cup of water, but that's not the full picture. Potato flakes also function as a thickening agent for thin soups and stews, as a partial flour substitute in flatbread dough, and as a coating for pan-fried foods. One ingredient operating across multiple applications. Nutritionally, potatoes retain meaningful potassium, vitamin C, and B6 through the dehydration process. The soft texture is also particularly useful for young children and elderly individuals who are most likely to resist eating under stress. Shelf life commercially sealed, 5 to 25 years depending on packaging. This earns its shelf space in multiple ways. Treat it as a multi-tool, not a side dish. If this is useful so far, like, comment, subscribe. It takes 2 seconds and helps get this in front of people who actually need it. Number 13. Dried spices. Flavor management in an emergency isn't a luxury. Stop thinking about it that way. The human appetite is strongly driven by sensory input. When food smells appealing and varies from meal to meal, people eat enough. When it becomes monotonous and flat, appetite suppresses even when the body's caloric need is identical or higher. Military nutrition researchers treat meal variety as an operational priority because reduced appetite leads directly to reduced physical and cognitive performance. A spice collection is the most compact, lightest, and cheapest tool for solving that problem. A small jar of garlic powder weighing roughly 80 grams can season 40 to 50 individual meals. Same goes for black pepper, cumin, paprika, smoked paprika, has chili flakes, and turmeric. Zero meaningful storage footprint, complete flavor transformation potential. The practical detail most people miss: dried spices don't spoil, but they fade. The aromatic compounds that create flavor degrade steadily when exposed to air, heat, and light. Pre-ground spices in a clear jar on a sunlit counter are losing potency every single day. Whole spices, seeds and bark ground just before use, hold their strength dramatically longer. Airtight glass jars, cool dark storage. Under those conditions, most dried spices stay fully potent for 3 to 5 years. If you're only choosing 3 for maximum versatility: garlic powder, cumin, and smoked paprika. Those 3 shift more meal combinations more meaningfully than almost any other set. So number 12, canned sardines. Every conversation about emergency protein defaults to the same list: dried beans, lentils, maybe canned tuna. There's one animal protein source that outperforms everything else in the canned category on nearly every relevant metric, and most people walk past it without a second look. Sardines are fully cooked in the can. Open the lid. That's it. When cooking fuel is rationed, that's not a minor convenience. It's a meaningful operational edge over anything that requires heat. A standard 120 gram can provide complete protein containing all 9 essential amino acids, plus omega-3 fatty acids supporting cardiovascular and neurological function. Here's the part that makes sardines genuinely unique among canned proteins: the bones. Because sardines are eaten whole, the canning process softens the bones completely. They are a meaningful dietary source of calcium. Almost nothing else in a standard emergency pantry addresses calcium intake at all. Most people don't realize this gap exists until they look at their full nutritional picture. The oil in oil-packed cans is also usable. Mixed into cooked rice or noodles, it adds caloric density and flavor. Nothing gets wasted. Rotate them into regular meals now so they're familiar before you need to depend on them. Number 11, canned coconut milk. This one solves a problem that dried goods alone cannot: fat in a form that's immediately usable, shelf-stable, and flavorful. A can of full-fat coconut milk contains substantial saturated fat, which provides caloric density and genuine satiation. Stirred into a pot of rice or lentils, it transforms the meal from sustenance into something that actually tastes good. Mixed with spices over any protein source, it produces a sauce that registers as an actual dish rather than survival food. The practical benefits stack up. Coconut milk is shelf-stable for 2 to 5 years. It requires no refrigeration. It's available at most grocery stores at low cost. And it addresses the macronutrient gap that most carbohydrate-heavy emergency supplies leave wide open. Not enough dietary fat. One operational note: once opened, coconut milk must be used. Plan to incorporate a full can into a single large batch meal rather than opening a can for partial use in a fuel-limited situation. Number 10, nutritional yeast. This looks like absolutely nothing. Pale yellow flakes. Most people who've never used it have no idea what to make of it. Set that aside. Summary, because what it does is important. The first few days of any emergency are primarily about caloric survival, carbohydrates, and protein. Most people plan for those reasonably well, but when a disruption extends past a week, something else starts happening that most preparedness planning never accounts for: micronutrient depletion. A diet built primarily on grains and legumes, which is what most emergency supplies are, will be severely deficient in B vitamins, specifically B12, B6, thiamine, riboflavin, and niacin. These vitamins drive energy metabolism, neurological function, and immune maintenance. When they run low, fatigue increases, cognitive clarity drops, mood deteriorates. Most people blame stress or poor sleep and never identify the actual cause. a nutritional gap built into their food supply from the start. Now here's the part worth paying attention to. Nutritional yeast doesn't taste like a supplement. It tastes like mild-aged cheese, savory, slightly salty, rich. Sprinkled on hot rice, stirred into soup, mixed into porridge, it makes food noticeably better while simultaneously providing a complete B vitamin complex, plant-based protein, and trace minerals including zinc and selenium. Two separate jobs from one lightweight, inexpensive ingredient. A single canister costs very little, takes up almost no space, and closes a nutritional gap that most standard food plans leave entirely unaddressed. Number 9. Popcorn kernels. This consistently surprises people. When they think of popcorn, they think of microwave bags. Nothing about that suggests emergency preparedness. That mental association is exactly why popcorn kernels are one of the most overlooked, genuinely useful items in any serious food supply. Storage fact worth knowing. Properly dried and sealed corn can maintain its ability to pop for decades. Archaeological sites have recovered kernels from ancient stores that still function. Few food products can make that claim without qualification. But shelf life is just the beginning. The obvious application, a covered pot over any heat source producing high-volume carbohydrate food in minutes, is only one function. Those same kernels can be ground into coarse cornmeal and cooked into a thick porridge similar to polenta, which is a completely different meal profile from the same compact ingredient. One item, two entirely different meal types. There's also a morale dimension that's worth taking seriously. Research on disaster psychology consistently finds that familiar comfort foods produce measurable positive effects on household stability, particularly for children. A bowl of popcorn during an emergency is a small but genuine moment of normalcy. That has real value when most things familiar have broken down. Number 8. Powdered eggs. Fresh eggs appear in more meals than most people consciously realize. Scrambled in a pan, mixed into batter, used as a binding agent in flatbreads, as an addition to soups and porridge. The moment refrigeration is unavailable, that resource is gone within days. Powdered eggs close that gap. Spray dried to remove moisture while preserving nutritional content. Properly sealed powdered eggs remain viable for 5 to 10 years or more in oxygen-removed storage. Measured powder plus water produces a liquid mixture that functions equivalently to beaten fresh eggs in virtually every application. Nutritionally, eggs deliver complete protein, essential fatty acids, and fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. Choline for neurological function. These aren't easily replaced by other stored foods. The specific reason this matters for households with children: under stress, children retreat to familiar foods. Scrambled eggs, egg-enriched pancakes, egg-based porridge. These are known, accepted, comfortable meals. The ability to prepare them from stored powder provides both nutrition and something equally important: the psychological weight of a normal meal when nothing else feels normal. That's not a soft consideration, it's a practical one. Worth your time? Like, comment, and subscribe. It genuinely helps. Number 7. Dried split peas. After several items that require explanation to appreciate, this one is refreshingly straightforward. Dried split peas do something under sustained heat that no other legume quite replicates. They dissolve. With enough water, heat, and time, they break down on their own into a thick, filling soup with no technique, no thickening agent, and no equipment beyond a pot. The preparation requirement is water, salt, heat, time. That's the complete list. Nutritionally, split peas deliver protein, substantial dietary fiber, complex carbohydrates, and a solid range of B vitamins and minerals. The combination of protein and fiber produces satiety that lasts meaningfully longer than grain-only meals. One large pot serves multiple people across multiple servings, which matters significantly when cooking fuel is limited. A brief soak before cooking reduces active boiling time, which is relevant when fuel conservation is a priority. Stored dry and sealed, they hold quality for several years without any special treatment. If you store nothing else from the legume category, dried split peas, almost no skill required, almost no fuel, one pot, a complete meal. Number 6. Dried lentils. Most people who've built any emergency food supply believe their protein needs are covered. Dried beans are on the shelf. Box checked. What they rarely think through is that most dried beans carry a preparation burden that only becomes obvious when conditions deteriorate. Kidney beans, black beans, chickpeas all require 8 to 12 hours of soaking before cooking, followed by another 1 to 2 hours of active boiling. In normal life, that's mildly inconvenient. In a situation where cooking fuel is rationed, that burden repeats with every meal across the full duration of an emergency. It compounds. Lentils sidestep this entirely. No soaking required. Rinse directly into boiling water, they're fully edible in 20 to 30 minutes. That single characteristic translates into fuel savings, time savings, and logistical simplicity that compounds significantly over days and weeks. One cooked cup provides roughly 18 grams of protein alongside substantial dietary fiber, iron, folate, potassium, and complex carbohydrates. Paired with any grain, rice, wheat, corn, the amino acid profiles complement each other to provide a complete protein covering all 9 essential amino acids. When this combination appears independently across dozens of cultures on every inhabited continent over thousands of years of human history, that repetition reflects something that actually works. Cost per gram of protein, preparation time, fuel efficiency. On every practical measure, dried lentils are nearly unbeatable. Treat them as a foundation, not an afterthought. Number 5, vinegar. Vinegar sits in the back of most kitchen cabinets, completely ignored. It has one characteristic that places it in a category almost nothing else on this list can claim: it doesn't expire. The acetic acid concentration creates a chemical environment that's hostile to the bacteria and fungi responsible for spoilage. A properly sealed bottle purchased today will be chemically identical and fully functional in 30 years. No rotating, no replacing. A no expiration concern. That's an extremely short list of foods that can make that statement without qualification. Shelf life is only the beginning. The flavor profile of a standard emergency food supply covers salt, aromatics, and richness. But almost nothing provides acidity, the bright, sharp, clean note that makes simple food feel finished rather than flat. A small amount of vinegar added to vegetables, stirred into soup, or used as a simple sauce base shifts the entire sensory experience of a meal in a way that nothing else in a standard pantry can replicate. Then there's the preservation application. When fresh vegetables become available during an extended emergency, from a garden, foraging, or a neighbor's surplus, vinegar converts temporary abundance into sustained supply through basic pickling. Without it, that window closes fast and that food is lost. White distilled for maximum versatility, multiple bottles, inexpensive, no special storage required, never needs replacing. Number 4, duck fat or rendered lard. Here's the gap at the center of almost every beginner emergency food plan. Not protein, not calories in general, fat specifically. Most standard preparedness plans build almost entirely around carbohydrates. Rice, beans, oats, pasta. Those are essential, but that approach ignores a macronutrient the body urgently needs during sustained stress, physical exertion, and restricted food supply. Fat is the most calorie-dense macronutrient available. 1 gram delivers 9 calories versus 4 from carbohydrates or protein. A small amount provides a disproportionately large energy contribution when you're working with limited rations. One beyond pure calories, dietary fat supports brain function, hormone regulation, body temperature management, and sustained energy output. Chronic fat deficiency produces fatigue, cognitive decline, and disrupted hormone production, real functional impairments in a situation that demands both physical capability and clear thinking. Duck fat and rendered lard are among the most practical stored fats for an emergency context. Rendered animal fats hold their quality significantly longer than most fresh vegetable oils when stored in sealed glass jars away from light and heat. They also contribute rich, savory flavor that genuinely transforms plain food. Before refrigeration, European civilizations preserved meat by cooking it slowly in rendered fat and keeping it submerged. A technique that worked reliably for centuries because fat is also a preservation medium. This isn't historical trivia. It's useful information if you're thinking carefully about extended food storage. Most emergency food supplies are fat deficient, and most people building them have no idea. A jar of duck fat or lard in sealed glass addresses that gap directly. Hit like, drop a comment, subscribe if you're finding this useful. It costs nothing and helps more people find this information. Number 3, ghee. If rendered animal fat solves the fat deficiency from one direction, ghee solves it from another, and adds a storage stability that's worth understanding. Ghee is clarified butter taken one step further. Regular butter contains fat, water, and milk proteins. Clarifying removes most of the milk solids. Ghee is cooked longer still until virtually all remaining moisture and milk proteins are eliminated, leaving nearly pure butterfat. That matters for storage because the two primary mechanisms that cause dairy products to spoil are moisture and lactose. Ghee contains almost none of either. The biological processes that make butter go rancid within weeks simply cannot operate without those substrates. This is basic chemistry, not marketing. Properly stored in sealed glass jars away from heat and light, ghee holds its quality at room temperature without refrigeration for months and significantly longer with any cooling at all. In a power outage situation where refrigeration is unavailable, that stability is the entire point. A single spoonful stirred into plain rice adds substantial caloric value and a slightly nutty, rich dairy note that neutral cooking oils cannot replicate. Ghee also has a high smoke point, around 250 degrees Celsius, making it more practical for improvised high-heat cooking where temperature control is imprecise. Small quantity, sealed glass, away from direct sunlight. Ghee and duck fat together address the fat deficiency gap from different flavor directions and both make simple, plain meals register as actual food. Number 2, salt before refrigeration, before canning, before preservatives. There was salt. For most of recorded human history, the ability to store food across seasons, to sustain armies, feed populations through drought, survive winter, depended almost entirely on salt. Roman soldiers received portions of their wages in it. The word salary derives directly from the Latin for salt. Medieval trade routes organized themselves around salt production. Entire economies rose and fell on access to it. Today it's so abundant that people have stopped thinking about it. That's fine in normal life. In an emergency context, treating salt as optional or as a seasoning afterthought is a significant planning error. Salt delivers 3 completely separate categories of value, and most people only think about one. The first is flavor. Salt is the single most foundational flavor enhancer in cooking across every food culture on Earth. Without it, every grain, every legume, every starch tastes flat and nutritionally unappealing. The second is preservation. Salt inhibits bacterial and fungal growth through osmosis. Salt curing meat, fermenting vegetables in brine. These are ancient techniques with direct practical applications when refrigeration isn't available. The third, and the one most people never consider, is physiological necessity. Sodium is an essential electrolyte. It regulates fluid balance, supports nerve signal transmission, and is critical for muscle function. During physical exertion, heat exposure, or sustained stress, all common in genuine emergencies, sodium depletion becomes a real medical concern. Adequate intake is not optional. And the storage characteristic that nothing else on this list can match? Salt does not expire. A sealed container purchased today will be chemically identical in 50 years. Not approximately, exactly. Store significantly more than you think you need. It is simultaneously a seasoning, a preservation agent, and a physiological requirement, and the only thing in your entire pantry that will never once need rotating or replacing. Number 1, whole wheat berries. Every other item on this list solves a specific problem or closes a specific gap. This one is what all of them are built around. For approximately 10,000 years, wheat has been the single most relied upon food source in human history. Nomadic populations became settled communities because wheat could be stored. Cities became viable because wheat could be stockpiled and distributed. Armies sustained extended campaigns because wheat could be carried. Populations survived multi-year droughts because wheat could be harvested and held against future need. That's not sentiment. That's a 10,000-year empirical record of demonstrated reliability across every kind of crisis human populations have faced, across every climate zone where wheat could be grown. Stored in sealed containers with oxygen absorbers in cool, dry conditions, whole wheat berries hold their quality and germination capacity for 25 years or more. In basic sealed buckets, a decade or longer. Among the longest verified storage lives of any food product known, the culinary versatility is unmatched by any single ingredient on this list. Wheat can be cooked whole like a heartier, nuttier version of rice. Ground into flour with a hand mill, it becomes the base ingredient for bread, flatbreads, crackers, pasta, and batter. Sprouted over 3 to 4 days, which requires only water in a container, when wheat dramatically increases its vitamin C content and digestibility in ways that raw grain cannot provide. An important nutritional capability when fresh produce isn't available. One ingredient, Dozens of distinct meal types. Virtually every food culture in the world. Nutritionally, whole wheat delivers complex carbohydrates for sustained energy, meaningful dietary fiber, moderate plant protein, and a range of B vitamins and minerals including iron, magnesium, and zinc. And here's what ties this entire list together. Every single item above this one functions best when it has something substantial to work with. Nutritional yeast needs something to sprinkle on. Ghee needs something to enrich. Bouillon needs something to flavor. Salt needs something to season. Vinegar needs something to brighten. Spices need something to transform. Whole wheat is that something. The foundation, the base from which everything else on this list operates. Without it, most of the other items on this list have nothing to work with. Sealed containers, oxygen absorbers, cool, dry storage. If you build only one deep pantry staple, build it here. Everything else you store makes it better. Whole wheat makes the rest of the list meaningful.